conceive of
constantly
something not having
rearranging.
a beginning. Yeah.
It's constantly rearranging, and like
I
everything, it goes through cycles. The sun has cycles up and down, and those cycles have cycles, and then the sun is cycling around something that itself has cycles, and that's cycling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we should probably run through the. Yes. Let's run through the 8 laws.
That's the way I look at it. You get,
Okay, where do they start?
Get a
What
group
page?
of people and put them all.
Well, we'll start with the king of the laws, which is causality, which is the heaven trigram. Okay, so you have yang over yang over yang. Okay, which is a sign of yang in the spiritual, yang in the material, and then yang also in the conscious layer. So you have Tian Ren Di is now 1, and 1 to the 3 is still 1. The law of causality is the king law, and you could say it's the only law, except for there are the other 7. But however, it sits in between, and this is the absolute key. It sits in between the law of flux or evolution, which is the wind trigram, and the law of resonance, which is the lake trigram. And these two are opposites of each other in that the wind trigram basically enables, there's a yin bar that appears below the 2 yang bars, indicating a subversion of normalcy. So whatever is expectant becomes unexpectant. It becomes undermined from below. Now the wind trigram corresponds to spring, it corresponds to storms, but in the medicine corresponds to charges that enter into the body, causing electrical disturbances in the nervous system. Okay, now that wind trigram represents the law of evolution, or law of flux, if you will.
I'm looking for
it also
wind.
represents change and time. Are you following me?
Yes,
Yeah,
but I'm
I am,
looking
yeah.
for the. Do you have? Is that in a? Do you have that in a graph or a
You know
chart?
what? That diagram. The easiest thing for you to do is to look up, pull up a diagram called pre-heaven Bagua, or Bagua, or
Okay.
pre-heaven arrangement. Usually they put the trigrams around the yin yang, which is called the Taiji Tu. Taiji means grand ultimate, and Tu just means diagram. So if you have the pre-heaven arrangement is the balanced arrangement, then you have the complete Taiji Tu, because now you have the yin yang, which of course is only a 2D representation of the 3D reality.
I got it.
And then you have, okay, very good. So the top it should be 3 bars, and then going around clockwise, you should end up with the broken line below 2 solid lines. Then you should end up with the solid line between 2 broken lines, etc. Okay, good. So the following law after the law of evolution is immediately into the danger, which is the abyss, is the law of relativity. And boy, nothing has caused more disaster in the sciences and in between religions than relativity. The relative perspectives have been incredible amounts of danger for humanity. I would say almost every situation of conflict out there is primarily a problem of the law of relativity, and yet it is one of the best ones that we have studied in the last 100 years that we need more effort in. And
well, they reckon using relativistic law that the Earth, due to its traveling at 30 kilometers per second around the sun, and the sun's traveling at 250 kilometers per second, that the Earth has actually compressed by about half the thickness of a blade of grass. and that's all relativity.
So we're not only are we going to be compressed, we're going to be expanded. It's going to depend on the relative perspective. And
Yes.
the most difficult relativity is not the special relativity. The most difficult for us is apparently scale, or what I prefer to call zoom. That things appear different at different zooms really hangs us up. We have the most difficult time reconciling macro, human level, micro level, nano level, and seeing those properties propagate, and we go, oh well, it just stops working at this level. Well, that's not.
It all becomes
It changes.
conceptual. It all becomes
it
conceptual.
changes. Yes.
Ramon,
This is
Ramon, I
because
think you answered it before. I think you answered this before when you said degree. And if you look at the laws of relativity, would I be right in saying that they don't recognise infinity? Because it has to have a starting point.
right. Well,
their measurement.
the laws of relativity, all the sub principles under the law of relativity, are flowing out of the law of evolution and change, which is flowing out of the law of causality.
Which is what you said to Greg before when Greg asked.
You can go back.
Yeah, when Greg asked before, when Greg asked before, well, when did it start? And you said, well, that's one of our biggest hang-ups. It's not really, it's always been there. It's infinite.
That's right.
Where we see everything in our perspective, that it has to have a start and a finish.
So
it can't
as
be a
we
work
move
in progress.
from relativity, we move down. We have the mountain trigram. The mountain trigram is the law of conservation. There's so much can be said about the law of conservation that we honestly cannot say it all. But let's just basically, he mentioned it earlier, Nick did, which is that nothing is created or destroyed; it's only transformed. Then comes the Earth trigram at the South Pole is the law of vibration, which goes into Planck and energies. Everything is frequency and vibration. And then comes the thunder trigram. The thunder trigram sits opposite the wind trigram. And we see now the opposite. The yang is starting to emerge below the created stratum. And this indicates the law of rotation. Everything is in cycles. After that comes the law of polarity, which is the fire trigram. Then comes the law of resonance. And from resonance or harmony or rhythm and balance, then comes causality again. And you can go backwards with these, by the way. The one that is the one that everyone needs to focus on in their life is the law of resonance. And that's the one that corresponds to Lake or the youngest daughter or joy. And you get joy because things that resonate generate yang or unity, and things that are dissonant create division and conflict and separation, which is yin. This is not a controversial bad thing. Without the separation, you couldn't be separate from the criminal or the pedophile or whatever. So it's a good thing to be separate. However, when one wants to resonate with the thing that they want, for example, if they want to study this law, if they want to study this cosmology, then they need to resonate by matching their frequency to that thing. And then if they do, the polarity will combine with the resonance and will create the causality. And the causality will lead to the changes that will lead to the things that they want in life. And these 8 laws are all one law appearing as 8 and becoming all the different sciences, all the different religions, all the different cults and the branches and the sects and the relativistic infighting, because everyone's trying to study some portion of the law of conservation that looks like this or looks like that. And all because they want to focus on the principles. And then some of them, of course, they want to focus not on the principles per se, but they want to focus on the power of the numbers, or they want to focus on the power of the force, or they want to focus on the power of the ether, or the power of the Lord, which is consciousness. And so then they separate everything. And this creates tremendous benefit and tremendous detriment at the same time. It's beautiful, but it's also problematic. But from the
It's
problem
life.
comes solution. It is life. It is life.
Well, long may it live.
Well, I put one of the laws of life is. Now, there's a destructive pole, the destruction of life, and then there's the creation of life. And the universe doesn't mind which one we do. It's us that are going to mind. We're either going to continue to pump toxic chemicals into the air and sea because we refuse to acknowledge this cosmology, or maybe the aliens are projecting a frequency onto us because we connected to them with the force and didn't understand the rippling effects and got basically stuck our foot in it. Depending on whichever hypothesis you think is the most pertinent to lead to a solution. Some people are afraid if we don't acknowledge the alien or government programs and the HARP and all that, then we'll never have it turned off or be able to guard ourselves. I tend to more go with that the ancient Hindu solution, which is that delusion and ignorance create dukkha, which is suffering, is the real problem. And in which case, then the only solution is pumping more energy into true education. And true education would involve this working cosmology. But that's just my opinion.
I think there are other factions who see the solution as just chopping away the dead wood, basically the stuff that doesn't fit in with the paradigm. Chop it away, carry on with your own. Very happily.
I would hope so. But I'm on the camp of Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla. I'm not in the camp of the ones who prefer to use it up and keep it for themselves.
Well,
I'm not going to
totally.
I'm not going to malign. I'm not going to malign Westinghouse and J.P. Morgan, but certainly the people who came after them are all about that, and the FBI and many organizations have certainly desired to hide out the truths of energy and the truths of free energy that are out there. And when I say free energy, I don't mean violation of thermodynamics. I mean actual free energy, energies that really work. And now we're at this.
Absolutely right.
By the way, I'm a capitalist. I have nothing against the green energy industry. I do have something against all the solutions being more on the toxic end, and no one talking about thorium, and no one talking about geothermal and resonators and wind kites, etc.
Have you heard the Communist Manifesto endgame for them? Is when the last capitalist is hung on the guts of the last liberal.
Well, they're up to come try. But the neat thing about my cosmology is it includes the science of violence. And so I'm a studier of the science of violence and self-defense, and I am not against I'm not against the flowing of love or the flowing of hate. Yeah. I'm only against the desires and wills of parasitic consciousness to control free range consciousness. I don't have anything against parasitic. I mean, obviously, I don't love ticks and such, but it's only when the tick tries to control my life by giving me disease that I have a problem with it. I don't mind theoretically that it exists. And so I don't mind theoretically that the parasitic progressive exists. I only mind when the progressive tells me they're progressive and they're really regressive. And then they also tell me that I can say this or I can't say this, or that I can die or be re-educated in their Borg-like mentality. And I say to them, well, that's a good theory, but who's going to enforce it? And if you think that you're going to
me, don't feed on me.
I've got the boxing sciences and the guns to prove that you're not going to win. And then if I'm dead, then I just get reconstituted. So it's not really awesome.
Treatment manifests itself through the behavior, like treatment people get manifest to a behavior precisely like they receive by others. Kindness manifests kindness, etc. I would say that's pretty true.
Generally, the science of self-defense, unfortunately, doesn't come up quite to that beautiful of a solution, because that would lead ultimately to pacifism, and pacifism, unfortunately, has not worked as a theory.
No, it does not at all. Hey, can you see the screen right now, guys?
No, I can't, Greg.
Yeah.
Well,
On my phone.
this picture that I have up here, I wish you could see it, because I'll put a copy in Discord for you, Adusa.
Yeah.
But it shows it's the wall at Douth Curbstone K51, the Seven Suns. It's amazing. It looks just like the polar configuration. If you can't see it, I'll put a picture in.
Delft?
It's amazing.
You know, Ramon, while you're there, last time we spoke, like, it was the same thing at the end of it. At the moment, our education systems and all that have become very polarised, like what you were saying with the Olympics. You know, and as I've looked through recently, listening to different things, Dollard, that, I'd argue with you that the current cryptos will probably fail, and the reason why I believe they'll fail is they're too complicated. Right, everything I tend to see out there that's natural is very simple. All right, so if you want to do a complicated mathematic formula for it, it probably won't last.
Well, there's some truth to that. I would say the key issue of, cash as a MEMS was an improvement over coin, which was an improvement over barter, because it maintained simplicity. What will happen is crypto will be forced to become simpler to engage with. And that's the only way that MEMS will become successful, beyond being a complex financial instrument for investment purposes. But the main interest that I have in it is that it is an emergent property out of the ether that is reliant on the power of the force and the power of the numbers. And so long as it's based on these things, then it has some kind of use. But I personally don't think that it's the best solution. But it is a viable solution for maintaining freedom of cash when cash is made illegal. And that's coming, by the way. It's already being voted on. And it's as we've seen with Australia, the Draconians will do anything that they can to maintain their own individual power. The funny thing is, their power is, of course, nothing compared to the electrical power that's surrounding everybody, even within the individual. But it is unfortunate that we still see power in terms of punches and manipulation, and it's pathetic, really. If there are aliens and they're observing us, I'm sure that they're embarrassed on our behalf.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, my thing is, Ramon, back to that, I went to the bank the other day, and I was in there, and they had on this screen this woman, and she was talking about, how she's carbon neutral and all that. And there was a couple of people there, tellers. And I said to them, so I take it that woman up there on the screen now, she never hops in a car, never hops in a plane. She walks everywhere. She doesn't use plastics. And she probably doesn't mean you can't use electricity anymore, because you can't differentiate unless you've got your own system on a pedal bike between what's green and what's not. Oh, no. We buy carbon credits. I said, what you're doing is, in reality, this is the truth of what you're doing. You're exploiting somebody else to live a lesser standard of life than you, so you can buy these so-called carbon credits that make you feel good.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the
Right.
day, the only way you can be carbon neutral is not to be creating carbon at all. I can't go
You
and
can't be
say
breathing
because
out.
I don't use or Edusa. Edusa can't say, well, Andrew, I don't do this, I don't do that. Well, you're allowed a certain level, so I'll tell you some of what I don't do. Because again, that's against the laws of thermodynamics that you talked about last time we spoke.
That's exactly
You
right.
know, and that's what I'm
If
getting at.
you're
The
breathing
whole
out,
thing is a charade.
it's correct.
Pardon?
If you're breathing out, you're not carbon neutral. So, and then the entire purpose of it, of course, is just mental control. It has nothing to do with any kind of science. It has nothing to do with the Enlightenment. It has nothing to do with, and how has this come about? How
It's
have
got
we
nothing to do with
allowed?
the environment. It's got
That's
nothing
correct.
to do with our
All
environment.
power. It's all
That's
human
right.
power.
That's
How
right.
has it come
We're
about?
going to grow
How
our
have the
world.
socialists? My central premise would be that the socialists and the Nazis have been able to come back and the communists to infiltrate because of the bad cosmology. And the reason, and I know that sounds like a stretch to say, but it isn't really, because the bad cosmology led to the death of the Enlightenment, and the death of the Enlightenment could be tied directly to the rise of anti-fact, post-fact social Marxism, and the belief that you can't have,
I would
if you
say,
kill 1 + 1 is 2. If you can kill 1 + 1 is 2, then you can control people's free will.
Yeah, in post-World War II era, we brought
I would
70,000
say,
Nazis over here after World War II, and that didn't help matters any.
No, it didn't. But bad ideas are they're just as dangerous a disease as COVID or the flu, maybe worse, because
I would say,
go ahead.
I would say, Ramon, forget communism and socialism. They're not the issue. The issue is fascism. And we're
That's
seeing
what we
that
were talking
now,
about.
whereby we've got companies now. We've got companies now in this country telling people if they don't get vaccinated, they'll be able to sack them. Right?
Right.
Now, that's
but
fascism.
why-
in its
but-
purest form. That's not
Yes.
communism. And that's not socialism. That's fascism. That's the
Fascism.
corporation
Yeah,
now
I understand
controlling
that.
it.
I understand that. Fascism is a very bad idea, but where does fascism come out of? In the National Socialist Party, it came out of a need of so you had the National Socialism, and it was all idea, but how do you actually make it happen? That's where the fascism comes from. Okay, so the only difference between it and communism is the mode of delivery, but
And I'd
they're
say
all
that bloke who,
ideas.
I'd say the bloke,
They're all bad ideas.
and my argument would be too that the bloke who went up into space last week and made out look, wanted to call himself an astronaut, and
That billionaire.
jumped on that.
Bezos.
That he ain't.
Bezos.
I wouldn't call him. I wouldn't call him a capitalist either. I'd call him a fascist, because you have a look at any of the. You go and look at what he pays his people and the way and all that create the wealth for him. He exploits them to the best he can within the law. So I'd argue that that's not capitalism either. That's again fascism, right? And
Right.
what Marx did was was able to, with what was his name? Eric, I can't remember his name now, who I claim most of it did most of the work because Marx was too lazy. Engels,
yeah.
because Marx was just lazy. Yes. I'd claim that Engels did the majority of it, but what he did was create a measuring technique for a lot of what we call product. So I don't see them things as the issue. To me personally, I say if I've read through them over the years, they've allowed you to measure what's going on. I'd say fascism's the greatest danger of all, because you get someone that's a speaker and it's all the busybodies behind that somebody that are actually controlling the narratives that no one sees. You could call that the dark matter. Ed Moret.
Well, I mean, if you look at the communist movement from Marx and Engels, they were all completely about equality, There are 100 different parties who joined the. For example, what became the Labour Party in England, and that was the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, the Blasted this, every kind of party you can think of, all the unions, and they all joined together in the name of equality, and turned into a Labour Party, which is just about. It's not quite communist, but it's certainly very left wing socialist. And when these equality ideas are actually manifested in a system, it's exactly the opposite that happens.
The problem is
Animal
That's
house,
right.
when you get.
animal farm.
I'm sorry, I thought you were done, so go ahead and finish your thought.
No, I've finished. Go on, Greg. Sorry.
I was going to say, this is the problem that I have mused over before. When you have a lot of people that have, say, a single cause that unites them, it can't gain any traction unless it's organized. And then when you try to organize it, there has to be leadership, and then that's when absolute power
Corruption.
corrupts. Absolutely. It's the corruption comes.
Yeah.
It can't be avoided.
Yeah.
Right.
So-
but
So Animal
the
Farm
main
was
issue-
the greatest book ever written.
but guys, and with all due respect, with all due respect, we're falling into the same division trap and politics trap that has been the reason why bad ideas are able to continue. From a perspective of the cosmology, even before you speak of the conditions of the MIMS, in these cases economic MIMS, there is the central issue that nothing is supposed to be continuously equal or at homeostasis at all times. That would violate cosmic rearrangement, which means that it's not only that the human nature is defied by Marx's ideas, it's that all of nature is defied by Marx's ideas, or that Marx's ideas defy all of nature. The cosmology teaches us that his ideas are absolute claptrap, and they always were claptrap, even though he came up with the ideas before the plasma electromagnetic cosmology revolution. And he was in the midst of the Industrial Revolution, seeing only the negative side and not seeing the positive side of it. But even though he was a caveman by modern standards, even back then, anybody could see that nothing is supposed to stay in homeostasis at all times. This is a violation of every basic tenet. Now, capitalism only is better in that it frees up the flow of the power of numbers at an accelerated degree by eliminating middle persons, in this case, mostly feudalist nobility, and just other humans that just wanted to get in the way and take advantage of other people's energies.
Right.
But theoretically speaking, that's the degree of which it's good. Beyond that, you have to look at each individual MIMS that comes out of the capitalism, because we have now discovered several forms of capitalism or products of capitalism which we know are bad MIMS. Crony capitalism,
War machine.
fascism, vulture capitalism, and then we have several good capitalist MIMS which we underutilize, such as micro lending, crowd funding. Right? We created crowdfunding and then immediately started putting limits on to how to use crowdfunding. It's an amazing. Crowdfunding is one of the greatest.
What is crowdfunding?
That have ever been created. Go ahead.
What is crowdfunding?
Like GoFundMe, those kinds of things.
Oh,
it's like
okay.
micro lending,
Okay.
but it's decentralized micro lending. So micro lending involves institutions, and we know that micro lending works. It brings people out of poverty. Yet we don't have enough micro lending. We don't have enough micro venture capitalism. These are things that there is only one micro venture capitalist website. Basically, it's called the Dream Exchange, and the difficulty in them creating the Dream Exchange for you to go and take your business idea on and raise money from venture capitalists without having to bring $2 million and meet with these people in their firms and their private equity firms and beg them for this cash. Is that there's regulations, and the regulations keep you from doing it. And we see this because the crowdfunding, what they discovered was that the crowdfunding unleashed untold capital for regular people to create ideas that were good ideas, by and large. Of course, every once in a while, somebody's inventing a new dildo, or they're creating a gun that shoots viruses or something. Who knows? But most of the ideas that come out of crowdfunding are brand new, excellent inventions that help mankind. The vast majority of them. Occasionally somebody is, they're saying, what was the very famous Save Toby? Give me money or I'll kill this rabbit and eat him. Okay. Yes, that happens because humans are quirky. But by and large, crowdfunding is one of the best memes, capitalist memes ever created. Why is it still so second fiddle? Whereas vulture capitalism, crony capitalism, and now, yes, resurgent fascism and big tech censorship and monopolies on the rise again. We know that these are bad memes. They've been bad memes for hundreds of years, ever since the Dutch East India Company first got going. And they continue because we do not have a grasp on the concept of the memes. And we don't have a grasp on it because we don't have a viable cosmology that is leading the charge. What we have is a dead cosmology that enables cults of death and dark universes and all sorts of things, which, of course, the Christians are going, it's Satanist. I don't blame the Christians for saying it's Satanist. It seems Satanist to me.
I'm for anarchy. That's the only true government. Anarchy.
But anarchy won't work. Anarchy won't work for the same reason you said before. What happens is, eventually, anarchy can only work if everyone's prepared to put in relatively equally. But what happens is, after a while, I realise that I can sit down on the log and have a cup of tea and a smoke while Greg continues to do the work.
Right.
And that's what always causes the fail.
There's always going to be concentrations.
Everybody has to have the same ideology.
That's right.
Of the work that's required to keep it.
We know that socioeconomics and the politics, because of the politics alone, let alone the socioeconomic part, we will get concentrations and gradients. And these gradients are good. I know that it sounds bad because we're sitting there going, who wants to live in a ghetto? But you know what? Lots of geniuses are born in ghettos. And lots of, I am the product of poverty. I am the product of poverty. If people want to know what drives Ramon, if anybody out there is going, God, this guy is off the chain with all this, I am the product. We were poorer than Native Americans, okay? We wish we had the money that they had on the reservation, okay? We were really, really poor. And the conditions of hunger that were there drove me to the conditions that I am now. And I'm not saying it's something I prefer. I don't give poverty to my kids, and I don't give them the concepts of poverty. I teach them the concepts of, I teach them this cosmology, and I teach them the power of capital. However, you cannot separate how ambitious I am from such a background. And we know that the gradients generate energy. We need the gradients, but we don't want it to become out of hand in any way. It should not be that an entire continent or two continents remains underdeveloped while another 2 or 3 continents and countries become overdeveloped relative to everyone else. We don't want to see that. But how to create the circulation, this is where the MEMS gets into the dual layer economics. And that's, of course, the dual layer economics is inspired by dual layers in plasma. But that's
Isn't
kind
it
of
funny that money is called currency?
Yeah.
It is. It is. And I think that it's very apropos.
The present,
energetic
current
flow.
times. The river.
I don't want to get into
current.
dual layer economics tonight, but I do want to say that the basic. I've already asked people many times, come and join the cosmology. It's an open source cosmology.
That's
Write
right.
EPMC papers and cite things. Go do the research. I don't care if they're doing archaeology. I mean, I try to do a lot of everything, right? I just released the paper on the IQ assets, China versus the world on the IQ assets. It's depressing, but it's reality. And then I talk about the geopolitics of that and what are the solutions and all the problems. And then I do the regular science. This is also an open invitation for people to involve themselves in the discovery of these MIMS. Because first of all, there's probably an infinite number of these MIMS. Secondly, I think that it's big money. And why does that matter? I know there's going to be a whole bunch of purists out there that, put up the cross.
And for the viewers, what does MIM stand for?
The membranous interface of the material and spiritual. The reason why it matters that it's big money is that if we want the alt stream to win on its own terms and not to be a cannibalized zombie that the standard model just gobbles it up, if we ever want the King Arthur truth to be set free, we need capital, whether it's to produce our own documentaries or our own video games or our own marketing materials, etc. We need capital to make that happen. And the best way to make capital...
That means we need better energy systems to create the capital. We can't use the capital system we're using now, because you've already told me, Ramon, on numerous occasions, the system we got now doesn't comply with the laws of thermodynamics.
That's right.
So I say it's fake money, fake. As I wrote to an economist here the other day who was going on.
And on top of that, on top of producing a form of capital or using capital in a way to prove the cosmology, it's also good to show people that the science of the cosmology produces capital by connecting to it. It worked for Thomas Edison.
Yes.
It worked for Nikola Tesla. It worked for George Westinghouse. I don't see why it shouldn't work for us. And so if people will do the research, then they will look into the MIMS. And if they look into the MIMS, we will find more gaps. If we find more gaps, we will bring the future into the now. Just like the powered flight.
Yes.
But instead of, our assumption is that we're going to have hoverboards and flying cars. But so far that hasn't materialized. Why? Either we are not understanding the MIMS correctly surrounding those, or it is not a priority to the universe. And we have to understand what is it that the universe is prioritizing, because these shifts are happening. I think it was Grouch was saying, I can't remember if it was Nick or Grouch, but one of you was saying essentially the changes are going to happen. The changes are going to happen, and we're either going to get with it or we're not going to get with it.
We got to get with it. That's why we do what we do.
One thing I want to know. How come Gil Bates is the richest man on the planet?
I thought Bezel was.
Oh, maybe him then. He's not much better, I don't suppose.
Because of the power of numbers. Again, it's very simple. Bezos took advantage of the power of numbers, and he used a MIMS that was an emergent property that uses the force. Very straightforward. He combined the internet with power of numbers.
He's not really the richest man on the planet. He has
like
access
40 billion.
to the majority of credit. No, he's not. He has access to $40 billion of credit. He doesn't have $40 billion. This is where everybody gets confused.
Either way,
Because
no one would argue that
if Bezos, he has access.
I hear he sells $1 billion a year.
The point, though, is any one of them, if they felt like activating under the cosmology, they could have done what J.P. Morgan could have done for the Tesla Tower. We need more people. We don't necessarily have to be in the billions range, but it is there is some argument that we do need that kind of power, because we had one guy who tried to create a space energy company, and he got into the millions, and he was trying to get to a $28 billion company. and then he ended up in jail. And the question is, was he really a crook, or did they railroad him? It was the British court system, so you know,
Railroaded,
there's a good chance that he was railroaded. If people want to look it up, it's Peter Sage, Space Energy. He got railroaded on some charges related to Hewlett Packard and Sprinters.
He was railroaded.
Maybe he was, maybe he was a crook. It's hard to know, but the point is, we still didn't end up with a space energy company. So
there was a guy in the U.S. about 10 years ago, maybe now. He created a adapter you could put on your carburetor, and your car could run on water. He got poisoned.
Yeah.
They just poisoned him and took all of his work.
Yes.
I remember that, yeah.
It's crazy. I mean,
so when we explore these MEMS, I want people to take up the invitation, explore the MEMS, really think about what connects the material and the spiritual.
Yes, I agree.
Look at what I've written so far in the diagrams, etc. But then also we have to engineer the MEMS that are, I guess they're unkillable in the same way that the scientific method is unkillable, or that the internet is unkillable. At least the basic concept of it.
What do you put in place? But what do you put in place to control the corruptibility? Because I agree with you, what you're saying, but what happens is it seems to be a human. I don't really think this is right, but it seems to be a human nature that if you set something up like that, engineer it, it's my job then to see if I can corrupt it, right? And that seems to be what often destroys so many good ideas.
I think so, Grouch, and I think the works of Isaac Asimov expressed that with his foundation trilogy, where these people kind of had an idea, but in order to capitalize it, and they had to go underground with it for a long time until they could get it strong enough to move, to have some inertia. They had to go and basically hide it, and not put the heads over the parapet, because they get shot off the big boys. You've got to get an impetus and pop up with a right lot of energy before they know you're there. That's the only way that I can see.
Well, I think that my role as a visionary is to first, I propose several of these hypotheses about what makes a good MEMS work. And it's in the papers. There's a part 2 is being edited right now, and it's coming out. It'll be out this weekend, I would say. And it has several hypotheses about what makes a MEMS work. And then in the new paper I'm working on, there's more hypotheses coming about what makes a MEMS work. But I would say that my role is to introduce people to this philosophy that is an outgrowth. It's a natural outgrowth of the cosmology. And bear in mind, everybody, that the heart of this is the cosmology, the plasma electromagnetic cosmology. Then there's the extended portion.
Well, they don't call it the queen of the sciences for nothing.
Right. And so there's lots of different extensions. I think that the most popular and where the biggest energy is in the alt stream, at least in our portion of the alt stream, it seems to be the electrogeology. That's one of the big ones. And then a lot of the people like the astronomy portion. There's some people who get into the creative mythology. Greg, you're one of those. And so we have plenty of that. Now the question is, where can the cosmology then reach to? And that's where this philosophy is only one philosophy. There's going to be other philosophies that emerge out of this extended cosmology. And I see my role as sort of kicking lots of pebbles and seeing how many of them roll down the hill and become big giant snowballs, and and then these things run through the problems, and then later on, billionaires and trillionaires. I want to create trillionaires, and I want to create these trillionaires not to be fascists, but to then serve mankind by utilizing their knowledge and their
breaking up.
skills to, hopefully I'm still there, to
Yeah, you are.
utilize their
You are.
knowledge and their skills to
Your
create
organisation ability.
terraforming products, to create world-saving products, because we haven't even talked about, Greg, the Birkeland polyphase superweb, and one of the whole reasons I created that paper was because no one's talking about the threats of class 6, 7, 8 plus cataclysms. Okay,
Yeah,
I mean, occasionally they talk about the asteroid. Okay, but you know, that's actually a broad range. It could be a class 4 catastrophe, or it could be a class 7 catastrophe.
Yeah,
and
we
these
live we have a skinny little surface on top of a dynamo of a planet.
That's exactly right. You hit the nail on the head when we talk about the Hajim interacting with the PIMS. We are on the thinnest layer of that.
Yes.
And where the shells of heaven
That,
meet the shells of earth,
that,
and we're existing in tenuousness. And it is the hero inventors that will create the solutions for that, whether they are thunderbolts generators that can blast the asteroids, or some kind of force fields, magnetic force fields around the earth.
Mm-hmm.
But the only way that's going to happen is if we engineer we're not going to do it by printing money to infinity and hoping that the printed money to infinity leads Bezos to make more penis-shaped spaceships to carry up a few rich people. And then they didn't even like it. Did you see this? They didn't even like the trip. This is so I'm sitting there going, then what was the purpose? If they weren't
when he had that goofy hat on. Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't.
And
his
constituents
it made their egos feel very full for a few hours. That's what it did.
I tell you, if the aliens were watching, they were laughing their asses off. That's for sure.
Yeah. Oh, they probably are. They probably are. That's another thing too. You know, if there were something like, I was just going to say, you know, if someone claimed to be an extraterrestrial and they had come here from another star, then they better damn well know the universe is electric, because if they don't, then they're full of BS.
Yeah, I mean, the chances are that an alien species, if they master this cosmology, they would never let a fiat economic system determine whether or not that they can interact with that cosmology and or create things that utilize that full power of the force and of the ether to generate new things. They would confine the economics and the power of the numbers toward, they would channel it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's how do you attain power? You channel the thing. You channel the river or into it, the canal, or the rail on the railroad. You channel it, and so the power of numbers should be channeled. Right now, it's just blah. It's everything. It's you know, it's every one of these celebrity physicists wants to be as big as the Rolling Stones by doing math. And I'm like, that is not the purpose of math. Why are you trying to do that? I know.
Yes.
It's biology.
Well, you know, in the ancient times, the only place someone's mind could expand was in mathematics without the church coming down on them. That's why we hold mathematics so highly in esteem.
That's true. And it's funny. We've had a couple of 20th century first examples of religions that were engineered out of the use of mathematics and of science. But there's still the problem. There's still the problem of resolution in biology, and we haven't yet dealt with that. It's understandable though. A lot of these guys, they want to get big, and then some of them want to end up they want to have a lot of sex. I mean, you know, and that's their biology.
Yeah, it's a young
we're kids.
But the downside of that is that it can harm forward progress.
I mean, yeah, no doubt.
Very
about
famously, did you guys ever see Wild Wild Country, which is the documentary about Osho? Did you guys ever see that? That's a hell of a documentary. It's a It's a 5-part documentary. It's pretty amazing. I didn't know this about Osho, but he owned like over 100 Mercedes Benz. Now, I don't have anything against like your Jay Leno owns a lot of cars, but he collects individual different cars. I think it's more like an art thing for him. But this is a person in Osho who is supposedly spiritual, and it's like beyond 2 marshmallows. You know what every marshmallow tastes like. Why did he need many Mercedes Benz?
No doubt.
And where was this power and this economics coming?
I think there's a little.
Why did Imelda Marcos have 2,000 pairs of shoes?
Psychosis.
Yeah, complete psychosis. You
Well,
know, it's
of course.
a waste of money. It's a
And
complete
so
waste.
that goes back to my point. So you have this guy who theoretically he inspired people to do really interesting and great things. If you watch the documentary, you'll see what I mean. These people, they were, before the cult became super dangerous, at first there was actually a huge amount of creative energy. And you think, God, that's exactly the thing that we need, but in permaculture or in free energy generation or in reforesting and creating, turning parks of grass into parks of food, that kind of thing. And so you go, well, what went wrong here? Well, what went wrong is simply that the MIMS, there was no MIMS design. It was just, again, ambition and desire, and I want it now. I want it all. And the universe just provided. It said, yeah, sure, you can make enough money to have hundreds of Mercedes Benz, and there's women everywhere, and you have all these guns, and you create this land. People need to watch the documentary, Wild Wild Country. It is a very intense documentary, and it caused me to write an EPMC paper right around the time the COVID was coming out, and I talked about gurus and all this stuff, and it made me think, if we could direct this biological gift we have / curse, then we would finally be capable of bringing this cosmology to bear in a positive manner. And I mean positive, absolutely, like reforesting rainforests, saving coral reefs, terraforming Mars, shooing the homeless, that kind of absolute positivity in which no one could, in their right mind, could argue is good or bad. Mm-hmm. But we're not going to do that if we don't acknowledge that there's a huge biological force driving a lot of our behaviors.
Yes, and you know what? It's just so ironic. It's just like
it's an electric force.
it exists on all levels too, and I'll give you a small example. When I was 12 years old, I played on a team called the Cubs. We were the majors. They had a minors and majors, and we were 11-0 going into our last game against the last place team that hadn't won a game yet. And guess what happened? They beat us. Done. Yeah, they beat us. Yeah, I mean, that's just a little example. That to me is the universe paying attention and making a change. You know what I mean?
You can't rest on your laurels, can you? You can never rest on your laurels. Never.
No, you can't get caught looking past something that's coming.
And we can't stop time and get on with we can't stop
Murphy's
time and
law.
analyze it. Yeah.
Murphy's law applies.
It will go wrong if it can.
And at the worst possible moment.
Yeah.
It happens.
Do you ever find it interesting that when Cortez arrived, right, he interrupted a government program which was all about ripping out hearts to sacrifice to either Mars or Venus. This isn't exactly clear which war god, but either way, it's probably Venus. And this government program, by the way, is probably was probably instituted by the Aztecs because the pox had spread down from Cahokia after the Chinese had arrived. But anyways, so setting aside whether or not the pox was the cause, there was some reason for this government program. Now, the government program of the Mexica, or we call the Aztecs, was to capture their neighbors and to then rip the hearts out of young men and virgins.
That's crazy.
Hundreds of thousands of them in a week. Now, this is a government program. Well, now here's the question. When Cortez showed up, at first they were completely amazed by the beauty of Tenochtitlan. I'm sure I'm butchering that word, but you get the Mexico City, okay? Mm-hmm. It was a beautiful paradise, except it had a mountain of skulls on a rack in the center, and there was government programs of heart ripping. Now, isn't that a strange dichotomy?
So they've ripped the hearts out of living people?
Yeah.
Yes. And here's the thing. The Spanish rightfully stopped the government program. Unfortunately, their own government introduced their own diseases and their own problems.
Oh,
and
yeah.
they also, their government program destroyed the beauty of the city.
Yeah.
So,
but there was no beauty because it was being ripped out.
Ramon, an easy way of putting that into analogy is if you take the makeup up off the beauty, she's often not very beautiful.
That's right.
You know, the old thing about you wake up the next morning and you look beside you and you want to chew your arm off.
Well, look at
and
Venus.
That's what was there. You know, like you scratched the surface, and underneath it, it was totally reprehensible to everything that majority could ever consider.
But don't you think
they were able to get away from it? They were able to get away from it.
But the point that I'm making is not that the Aztecs were a better society than the Spanish.
Did it?
The point I'm making is
no, because the Spanish stopped that, and then they went to introduce their own.
But my point is, wouldn't it be ideal if you could have a humanistic government system which does not also ruin all of the beauty, which weirdly existed in an anti-humane government system? Wouldn't it be ideal
if you could do that?
Well, we don't know.
It's like Abraham sacrificing
what
the
gave
thing that he
them
loved
that
the most,
idea?
Isaac. They wanted to kill the things to appease their gods.
Here's what we know from the Chinese when the Chinese arrived in Cahokia. The essentially proto-Mayan civilization up there was engaged in just the exact same thing. They had the same hill of skulls. They had the similar dress. They had similar customs, right, based on the Mayans from before. And they were engaged in scouring people of their sins, particularly their own people, but also any tribe people that they could catch, and bring to the capital in Cahokia. Then they would do it. Now they showed this off to the Chinese proudly, and then later on, the pox began to spread from the Chinese army into the Cahokia. And the Cahokians doubled down. So probably the Aztecs were responding to the influx of the pox 60 years later by trying to appease the gods, as Nick said, sort of an Abraham and Isaac situation. And this goes back to very bad ideas people have had about whether or not we could control the gods with our human activity here on Earth, which is ridiculous because the power levels that we are able to marshal are not capable, obviously, of extending to that kind of degree. We now know energy, just electricity-wise, 30 milliamps can kill our heart, 100,000 amps above the up in the plasma electromagnetic sky at all times, actually up to 600,000 amps on an average day. So you know, it was an unreasonable belief, but it is a superstitious belief that was found in Babylon. It was found in China. It was found in Mexico, in North America and South America. It was kind of a belief all over the place. But what I'm more interested in is not that people got superstitious. That happens even to this day. There are YouTube videos of people having superstitious beliefs in suburb neighborhoods, you know, about objects and trees, etc. What I'm interested in is that there was a culture that created so much beauty despite being so ridiculously unhumanistic. And then another one that was based on a humanistic cosmology, but then behaved so barbarically and spread disease and destruction. In both cases, the common denominator is government programs, by the way. I just want to point that out. But
well, I would argue the common denominator is power and control. That's the common denominator, power and control.
That's what government programs are.
Within the human.
Yeah, because who declares themselves the government?